Well, welcome everybody to the Get Healthy webinar. I have to say, I am extremely excited for this one because we are with Christian Drapeau, who is the scientist, author, medical plant expert, and pioneer in the field of stem cell research. He is the founder and chief science officer at StemRegen. And I had the opportunity and privilege of interviewing Christian prior to this on a podcast where, wow, I just found out so much information about stem cells and the product StemRegen. My name is Dr. Tracy Straub. I will be your host today. And I'm the Chief Health and Growth Officer here at Get Healthy Store. But today our topic is endogenous stem cell mobilization, a novel therapeutic approach. So Christian, I am more than excited to have you here today and learn more about this great product. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
Well, I know you have a slide deck. I'm going to let you bring that up and introduce yourself to the audience, and then I will be in the background learning and waiting patiently.
Okay, there you go. You can see that, right?
Yes,
Perfect.
looks great.
So my background is brain research. I was at the Montreal Neurological Institute, essentially working. I was much younger. This is the early 1990s. So I was working on epilepsy and memory. And then one thing leading to another, I ended up studying the effect of a plant on human health, and this is really what led me to all the work that I did on stem cells. So I'll come back to that a little bit later. So I would like to just start by kind of positioning here stem cells in the way that normally people see stem cells. When we talk about stem cells, for most people, it means an injection. It's a treatment. We go somewhere to get stem cell injection, and the main questions are which kind of stem cells, what are the sources, do we do any treatment to these stem cells, and where do we inject them? And yet, this is really just the tip of the iceberg. The world of stem cell research, as what it has revealed in terms of the role of stem cells in life, in the body, goes so much deeper than this. Let me just say that, or bring to your awareness, let's put it this way, that those stem cells that are oftentimes used for treatments, they come from your bone marrow, they come from your blood, they come from your fat tissue, they're already in your body. So to me, the question since the early days of stem cell research was, if stem cells have such enormous regenerative potential, and they're already in the body, so what are they doing in the body? And understanding what is the natural role of stem cells in the body does not eliminate stem cell injection. It simply puts the whole concept and the knowledge of stem cells and the meaning of stem cells in our lives in a completely different understanding. So understanding the role of stem cells in the body, to me, changes our understanding of health, wellness, I would even say disease formation, longevity, and I believe it's going to call the way that we practice medicine. So I know that it's a big statement, but I would like to dive into this and kind of show you what is the role of your own stem cells. Before I jump into this, one quick video that to me I'm using this video to kind of create a breach in people's mind, because oftentimes people wonder, is this whole story of stem cells real? Are stem cells real? And this video here comes from the work of Dr. Doris Taylor. She took the heart of a mouse, circulated on the cardiac muscle, the cardiomyocytes, digestive enzymes that completely digested the muscle of the heart. So at the end, they're left with the soft skeleton of the heart, the connective tissue of the heart that still retains the traces that it was a heart. And on that connective tissue, they laid out stem cells isolated from the bone marrow of the animal. And after about a week, they have a beating heart in a test tube. So just to show the absolutely amazing regenerative power of stem cells as they sit right now in our bone marrow. So the question is not, are stem cells real? The question is, what stands in the way of stem cells to be able to do this in our body? What prevents them from doing this, or what can we do to allow this regenerative potential to fully express itself in the body? So going back to where I started to say, what is the role of stem cells in the body? And essentially, stem cells are the body's repair system. So just like we have an immune system the body as a repair system. It is very simple. I'll briefly describe it. It is very, very simple. I think where it is hard to let it sink in and really appreciate it really for what it is that the last time that we acknowledged or discovered a system, or described, I should say, a system, the way that we know bodily systems today was in the early 1900s with the description of the immune system, the endocrine system, and the nervous system. And now for a century, that's how medicine was taught. That's what we know of anatomy. And to realize in the early 2000s that we discovered that the human body has another system that had not been seen before, it's almost like it's hard to swallow. It's hard to accept. But and that's what I want to describe today. So let me describe it to you. Let it sink in, because really the human body has another system, just like we have an immune system, and it's the repair system. And it was discovered after the development of very specific tools in medicine, like, for example, green fluorescent protein. It received a Nobel Prize in 2008, and it's a way of being able to tag a cell. So if you tag a stem cell, and then after that you watch it become, for example, a liver cell, then you can tell that that liver cell now that is tagged, that is green fluorescent, you can tell that it was a stem cell the day before because it was a tag cell. And until the use of those kinds of markers, the phenomenon was completely invisible. If you look at a slide of a tissue under a microscope and you see a sort of a cell that looks like a lymphocyte, you will say, this is a lymphocyte that has penetrated the liver tissue. The day after, if you look at that same cell and it's a liver cell, you will say it's a liver cell. There's no way that you can tell that the liver cell was a lymphocyte the day before. Stem cells are part of the broad family of lymphocyte. It's only when you mark them that you can really see this whole transformation and reveal this whole phenomenon that has been there since the day we are born. Because if we think about it, every single human being on this planet, definitely everyone listening to this webinar, we've all had in the past an injury, a broken bone, a cut, a burn, a surgery, whatever, a bruise. We've all had something that went wrong with the body, and we've all witnessed that the human body repairs, that it heals. And yet in medicine, there's no clear description of all this phenomenon is happening. There is description of how, let's say, a cut may heal locally, but in terms of the actual healing of a substantial wound, we just tell you, go rest and let the body recovers without a clear understanding of that phenomenon. And that is stem cells. So if you have a significant injury, a cut, a broken bone, a burn to the skin, a stroke, a heart attack, these are the models that have been used to study the system, but it's happening in any kind of injury. The injury will trigger the release within about 10 to 12 hours of specific compounds that are picked up in the blood, like GCSF, stem cell factor, interleukin 8, and a few others. They go to the bone marrow. They trigger the release of stem cells from the bone marrow. We can see the number of stem cells increasing starting the second day. Will peak after 3 to 5 days, up to about tenfold increase in the number of stem cells in circulation. These stem cells circulate everywhere. They don't know where the body has an injury to repair. So what is happening is, starting on the second day, the tissue that is affected releases one specific compound called stromal-derived factor 1, that will connect with a specific receptor at the surface of stem cells. And when that connection takes place in the fine capillaries of the affected tissue, it triggers the migration of stem cells across the capillary wall in the tissue. And upon contact with cellular debris of that tissue, stem cells will multiply and transform into cells of that tissue, or will release growth factors through a paracrine effect, and will stimulate the stem cells that are endogenous to that tissue, stimulating the repair of that tissue. But that whole process of repair is engineered, if you want, by stem cells. So stem cells are the repair system of the body. And if you look at this whole process of releasing stem cells circulating, migrating into a tissue, proliferating, and differentiating in cells of that tissue, the part that has been the most studied is the link between the number of stem cells in circulation and the body's ability to heal. So in the early 2000s, when stem cells were sort of rediscovered, and we started to see their role into treatment, therapeutic role. We thought, or science thought, that stem cells from the bone marrow could only become blood cells. It was the knowledge that we have before, and we thought that they were limited, unable to become other things than blood cells. So researchers started to go and look for other sources of stem cells from the bone marrow, from umbilical cord. We found them in fat tissue. We looked at fetal cells at some point, stopped using them because of the inherent ethical issue. But we started to look for sources. And during the development of all that work, many scientists went back to stem cells from the bone marrow and discovered that indeed they are not limited. They can become cells of various tissues, and they started to use drugs like GCSF, which is what the body normally releases when you have an injury, and looked at the impact of injecting these compounds, triggering the release of our own stem cells, and see what would be the impact of this on tissue repair, on the development of various diseases. So that's the science that I'm going to use here to illustrate the impact of releasing our own stem cells in human health. So the first thing to look at is first to realize that there's a direct link between how many stem cells we have in circulation and the body's ability to repair. So you take two people, and we've witnessed this in our own lives. You've seen it in the clinic. You see two individuals with the same broken bone, roughly. No two broken bones are identical, but you see patients with a specific issue, and there's a broad spectrum between the people who repair very quickly, very efficiently, and those who don't, where this injury or the problem kind of lingers. And essentially, a key parameter here is that those who repair fast simply end up being people who naturally have more stem cells in circulation, and vice versa. Those who don't repair well simply don't have naturally a lot of stem cells in circulation. The number of stem cells in circulation are dictated essentially by two things: your age. As we age, the number of stem cells in the circulation declines very significantly. We'll come back to that a little bit later. And the other one is just, we don't know. I would say genetics. Like everybody has a certain number, specific number of stem cells in circulation, which can be extremely broad. What I mean by this is that you take just about any blood parameter, white blood cells, red blood cells, platelets, and the range between what would be a low number of platelet and a high number of platelet or red blood cells or anything is not extremely big. Like it's no more than maybe twofold, threefold maximum. And when we look at stem cells in the lab, we have seen patients with as little as 0.01 stem cells per microliter, and others as high as 5 stem cells per microliter. This is a 500-fold difference between the number of stem cells in people with little stem cells and people with a lot of stem cells. That's what I'm referring to here. The people who don't repair well are the people who naturally don't have enough stem cells in circulation. But we know that compounds like GCSF can trigger the release of stem cells from the bone marrow. So it brought back the question, what if we could stimulate the release of stem cells from the bone marrow, put more stem cells in circulation? Could we boost the body's ability to repair? So I'm going to show you a number of studies that have been done to show this. I don't want to dive into my aim here is not to tell you, look, it is good for the heart, it is good for the liver, it is good for arteries, for the brain. I'm just picking a few examples in the literature, studies that will show the impact very clearly in one study. There are hundreds of studies that have been done published in the medical literature, basically showing that putting more stem cells in circulation can basically help just about any aspects of human health to improve, because it basically stimulates the repair of just about any tissue. Let's start with the heart. So here's a study in which scientists essentially did a ligation of the coronary artery, so triggered a heart attack. After the heart attack, they removed that ligation of the coronary artery. They let the animal recover, and they separated the animals in two groups. One group is control, and the other group, they injected compounds known to trigger a massive release of stem cells from the bone marrow. So in this case, GCSF and stem cell factor. So It was not quantified in that study, but a cocktail of these two compounds can increase the number of stem cells in circulation like up to something like 50-fold. So massive release of stem cells from the bone marrow. When they looked at the animal 1 month later, if you look at the control group, you can see severe scar tissue in the ventricular wall, no new blood vessels, 17% survival, and fairly severe signs of cardiomyopathy. In the experimental group, you get complete renewal of the ventricular wall, new blood vessels tapping in the other ventricles, 73% survival, and virtually normalized cardiovascular function. So in a world where there's not a whole lot that we can do to help somebody recover from a heart attack, here's a study that shows essentially complete renewal after 4 weeks. The protocol that was used here, the injection of GCSF and stem cell factor, can have a severe side effect, which is platelet aggregation. So it would be to say, to help you recover from your heart attack, let's give you a stroke. And that is the main reason why this treatment, although it shows clearly that if we can put more stem cells in circulation, we can really boost the ability of the heart to repair. Practically, in humans, it is not a treatment that can be utilized. But it really shows that if you can release more stem cells, your body can utilize them. Other studies have looked at other aspects of cardiomyopathy, the consequence of a heart attack. One is cardiac enlargement. And if we simply inject GCSF, release more stem cells, you can see that the heart, the size of the heart gets back to its normal size. If you look at cardiac remodeling or fibrosis in the heart, you can see that by injection of compounds that trigger stem cell release, you get a significant reduction in fibrosis. We will look at an example of this a little bit later. But essentially, when you don't have enough stem cells in circulation, any kind of injury anywhere in the body will trigger the proliferation of fibroblasts, who will repair the tissue the best that fibroblasts can do, which will leave you with a keloid scar. But if you have enough stem cells in circulation, these stem cells will become normal tissue, and you really minimize the formation of scar tissue. So this one was for the heart. Now let's look at another one for diabetes. To show that putting more stem cells in circulation can have an impact on diabetes, we need to be able to show two things. We need to be able to show that stem cells can naturally leave the pancreas, leave the bone marrow, go to the pancreas, and become insulin-producing cells in the pancreas. If we can show that this is natural, then the next step is to show that by putting more stem cells in circulation, we can boost this natural phenomenon to a point that it leads to a significant repair in the pancreas. So this study here is beautiful because its design allows to clearly show that stem cells can become insulin-producing cells of the pancreas in one study. So in that study, they basically took male mice in which they did a genetic mutation. They coupled the gene of green fluorescent protein to the gene for insulin. So any cells in these animals that is starting to produce insulin will also produce green fluorescent protein. So you shed light on that cell and it will glow green. So you can visually identify it very easily. So if we were to shed a light on these mice, we would see the pancreas glow green. Now they irradiated female mice and then injected stem cells from these male mice into these female mice. So we have female mice whose entire body is made of cells with the double X chromosome, so no Y chromosome. So if I can find a cell that has the Y chromosome, that means it was derived from the male stem cells that I injected. And if any one of them starts to make insulin, it will activate the gene for green fluorescent protein, so these cells will become green. So let's look at this cell. So these are cells isolated from the pancreas about 2 weeks later. If you look at that cell and you tag it for the Y chromosome, it has the Y chromosome. So that cell came from the male cells that were injected, stem cells. If we shine the light, you see that it's glowing green, so it has transcribed the gene for insulin. And if you use a red dye for insulin, you can see that it's actually producing insulin. So this is a stem cell from the bone marrow that migrated in the pancreas and started to naturally produce insulin. And if you look carefully, it is right between the other two cells of the pancreas making insulin. So it's not a sluggish cell. It's not an overactive cell. It's a very normal cell of the pancreas. And at the end of this presentation, you will have understood that this is the natural process that is happening during the entire life of every single human being everywhere in the body. There's a constant process of tissue turnover, and stem cells replace the cells that are being lost. There's not a cell in your pancreas today that you are born with. They were all replaced to this natural process of tissue turnover that is based on stem cells. So this study on its own shows very clearly stem cells can leave the bone marrow, go to the pancreas, and become insulin-producing cells. So what can we do now to the process of diabetes? So in medical research, when we study diabetes, one of the model for diabetes is the injection of streptozotocin. So you take these islets of Langerhans that are producing insulin, and if you inject streptozotocin, which is a bacterial toxin, it is uptaken by these cells. It then kills these cells, and within 24, 48 hours, these animals basically no longer produce insulin. They are fully diabetic. So this group of scientists did the same process, injection of streptozotocin, followed by the injection of compounds that trigger endogenous stem cell mobilization, and they obtained a partial reconstitution of the islets of Langerhans, but this was enough to essentially restore these animals to be physiologically normal. Like they were making enough of their own insulin. The same protocol was used in humans, something like, I think it was in 2008. And they generated 2 rounds of stem cell mobilization in 14 individuals recently diagnosed for insulin-dependent diabetes. And of those 14, 13 were independent from insulin between 3 to 36 months, so 3 years. And at the end of 3 years, it was the time that they allotted for that study in terms of follow-up. At the end of these 3 years, some individuals were still independent from insulin. Not to show that we have found the treatment for diabetes, but clearly to show that stem cells from the bone marrow, if we trigger their release, they are powerful enough to go and repair an organ that technically in medicine right now is considered to be not repairable. Like diabetes is considered to be an incurable disease. Here's another one, Parkinson. When Parkinson is studied in mice, so this is a graph that shows the time of immobility of a mouse in a cage. So a mouse is a prey, as an animal. So it walks a little bit, then it stops and it's watch its environment to see if they see movement around. So as they move, they will normally stop and stand still an average of 10 seconds. In the experimental Parkinson group, the 3 columns to the right, 6-hydroxydopamine is injected into the substantia nigra, which kills dopamine neurons in the substantia nigra, which is essentially the diagnostic or the phenomenon of a Parkinson in humans. That region of the brain dies, and then the people develop Parkinson. So these mice basically have, for what you see in mouse, they have Parkinson, which can be quantified by a reluctance in their movement due to a lack of coordination, and they will remain still more than 1 minute. If we give these mice L-Dopa carbidopa, which is the normal treatment for Parkinson, you can see that they do much better. But if you inject GCSF that triggers the release of their own stem cells, you can see almost like a normalization of their function, or at least their coordination. Now, to quantify the evolution of the loss of coordination in that study, they put a piece of tape of the nose of the mice and counted the amount of time that it took to remove it. And you can see in the in the control mice, you can see that there's almost like a learning curve between day 1, day 5, and 2 weeks. But on the control Parkinson group, you see the evolution of the loss of coordination. And after 2 weeks, it takes about 25 seconds to remove that tape. On L-Dopa carbidopa, you see the same phenomenon. It's just slowed down. But on the group in which they triggered the release of stem cells from the bone marrow, you see injury to the brain, and then you see actual reversal. It would have been nice to see what would have happened if they simply continued the study and monitored, I don't know, a month later and see what would be the results. But we'll show you a case of this in humans later on. But again, just to show here that compared to the normal treatments that is given L-DOPA, carbidopa, just triggering the release of stem cells from the animal's bone marrow gives greater results. The last one that I will show you is Alzheimer's. So these are mice that have been engineered to develop naturally after about 4 to 6 months of age. They naturally develop Alzheimer's, which is cognitive deficit, development of plaque in the brain, amyloid plaque, everything that we see in humans, Alzheimer's, and compare that to a control group of mice. So they are placed in a maze, and we count the amount of time that it takes for the mouse to essentially find its way out of the maze. So we can see that in the control mice, the first time it's about 13 seconds. After fourth attempt, they have learned the maze, and it takes them a little bit short of 6 seconds. You test them again 6 months later, and we can see the exact same learning curve. Now you take a mouse that will develop, that has been engineered to develop Alzheimer's. When they're tested at 2 months, they behave like a normal mouse. But when they're tested at 6 months, then you can see that there's a clear cognitive deficit. After the fourth attempt, they're still 4 seconds longer than the other mice. If you take the exact same mice engineered to develop Alzheimer's and you test them after 2 months, and now you trigger a round of stem cell release from the bone marrow when you test them 6 months later, or at 6 months, they behave just like a normal mouse. So just to show you again how releasing stem cells from the bone marrow can go to the brain and can repair the brain, can go to the heart, repair the heart. We showed the pancreas. I can show you exact same data with problems to the liver, arteries, lungs, stroke, spinal cord injury, and many different types of tissues, kidneys. By releasing stem cells, you can really help these organs to repair. Now, as these studies were all done, something else has emerged that to me is probably the most important message that I will leave you with today, which is the first two state that if you have more stem cells in circulation, either naturally or by triggering the release of stem cells from the bone marrow, your body can utilize these stem cells to repair, and at times to a very significant extent. The last observation is to say that if you happen to be a person that has fewer stem cells in circulation, then you are at a greater risk to develop age-related disease. And this comes from the fact that we are born with red marrow that makes stem cells very early in our aging process. Red marrow converts into fatty marrow that does not make stem cells. By age 15, we have lost 50% of our red marrow. By age 30, we have lost up to 90% of our red marrow, and that decline keeps going. So there's a time in our 30s, early 40s, where we all discover we do not recover as fast as we used to from anything, from an injury, from a surgery, or just from like go and do something that you don't normally do, like go and hike a mountain, go to the gym and do something that is unusual. And the day after, you are sore for much longer than you used to be sore when you were doing the same activity, let's say when you were 15 or 20. It's because you don't have as many stem cells in circulation to repair. So if you don't have enough stem cells in circulation to repair, you also don't have enough stem cells in circulation to offset this normal process of tissue turnover, because this is something else that stem cell research has revealed. As scientists studied the role of stem cells in tissue repair, it was observed that while stem cells will primarily go to a place where there's an injury, in the background, they go everywhere in the body at a pace that is different from every tissue. We have a new skin every month. We have a new liver every 2-3 years. Even the heart that is believed or was believed in medicine to be to mature up to about 8-10 years of age, and after that, this is what you have in terms of number of cardiomyocytes. And if you lose any of them through a heart attack or any kind of problems affecting your heart, then you cannot regenerate your heart. And yet we know today that the heart actually regenerates to a rate of about 1% a year, which is significant because it means your heart can repair. We have seen it in the study that I showed you, and I'll show you the kind of results that we have in humans as well by triggering the release of stem cells from the bone marrow. But my point here is that everything is in a process of tissue turnover. So if you don't have enough stem cells in circulation at some point in your 30s, 40s, and 50s to offset this process of cellular loss, that means there's a point where we start to accumulate a deficit in various tissues. And if you accumulate a deficit in cells making insulin, that's diabetes. A deficit in the heart, it's heart disease. A deficit in cells making dopamine, it's Parkinson. A deficit in your lung, it's COPD. So it's easy to see that this decline in number of stem cells is the cause of age-related diseases. So I proposed this view about 13 years ago in the scientific literature, suggesting that the fundamental cause of disease formation is this natural decline in stem cells, meaning a decline in our ability to maintain our tissues. And this lack of ability to maintain then leads to the decline of our organs and tissues. And there's a way to test if this is true. Let's go and count the number of stem cells in people who have developed various kinds of age-related disease, and let's compare that to what we find in healthy people of the same age. And there's about 50 of those studies that have been published at this point. So let's very quickly go through some of them. So here's diabetes. The number of stem cells in the blood circulation of people with normal glucose tolerance, set up here as 0 or 100%. And then you look at people with impaired fasting glucose, impaired glucose tolerance, and diagnosis of diabetes mellitus, so insulin-dependent diabetes. And you can see virtually like a straight line. As people advance in diabetes, it's accompanied by a lesser number of stem cells. In other words, a lesser ability to repair. If you look at the same phenomenon here in kidney disease, so kidney failure, you can see in much fewer stem cells in people who have reached late stage kidney failure. We can see the same thing here with erectile dysfunction, about 50% of stem cells in circulation compared to people without erectile dysfunction. And we will see the same relationship with vascular health here with hypertension, with COPD, emphysema, with Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, heart disease, Alzheimer's. We've seen it also with Parkinson. Anyway, I'm showing just a few here, but the list keeps growing. The conclusion here is really to see that people who have developed age-related disease have on average 50 across the board, 50% or less than the number of stem cells that we find in healthy people of the same age. So going back to something that I said before, this vast range in the number of stem cells naturally present in the blood circulation of people who develop age-related disease happen to be those who have fewer stem cells in circulation. They lose their ability to maintain their tissues, so tissue deficits show up earlier in life. So if there's a way for us to put more stem cells in circulation, then we can basically help the body repair, but also maintain the health that you have today for decades to come. So I started my journey into this whole world of stem cell research when in 1995, I was hired to study a specific plant that you see here to the left. So Aphanisom Anonphlos aqua, known as AFA. It's a natural blue-green algae that grows in Klamath Lake in Southern Oregon. So right after the passage of the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act in America, companies selling different product were required to have scientific data to support any of the claims that they were making. This company was making claims about support to immune function, anti-inflammatory benefits, and benefit on the brain. So I started to look at these three different applications, if I could say. And very quickly, we identified specific compounds and mechanism of action behind the benefits to the immune system, to inflammation, and to the brain. But as I'm doing this work, I also I'll show you some image here of blue-green algae in the background. So as I did all this work, I came across people who taking this blue-green algae, reversed multiple sclerosis, COPD, severe emphysema, heart disease, diabetes, Parkinson, Alzheimer's, many different kinds of problems, liver failure. And at first, they're just stories. They don't have any scientific value. But over time, the number of those studies, and not studies, but cases, and for some of them, I could see their medical records, and I could clearly see this product seemed to have done something really substantial in their life. I felt compelled to try to dig a little bit deeper and see what it was. And the whole discovery was in the early 2001. So January 2001, I came across a study documenting stem cells leaving the bone marrow, going to the brain, and becoming a brain cell. If at the time what I knew of stem cells was pretty much what everybody knew about stem cells, which is sadly to this day probably what med students are still told in med school, that stem cells are really only becoming blood cells. Maybe today they're talking about exceptionally, they may have been seen to become other things. We need to really come back to the conclusion that they actually can become not only everything in the body, but they do this every day. It is the body's repair system. The science is absolutely unequivocal on this. But in 2001, it's not the knowledge that we had. So, on the basis of that paper, I was curious. I went to a local medical library, started to see what else I could find. I found one other paper documenting stem cells going to the liver, another one documenting stem cells going to the heart. So I simply thought, if stem cells can go to the brain, heart, and liver, what mechanism of action could we think of in the body to allow stem cells to become heart, brain, and liver and not the rest? It made no sense. So for me, it was just a matter of time. Scientists will show that they can become everything. And if they can, then they must be the repair system of the body. So we published an article in a journal called Medical Hypotheses, suggesting that stem cells were the repair system of the body. And in the back of my mind, just like we have plants supporting the immune system, what if this blue-green algae was supporting the repair system? So we acquired a flow cytometer that allows counting stem cells in the bloodstream, and we started to count stem cells. We started on ourselves before and after taking this blue-green algae. And we saw the whole phenomenon. The plant was a stem cell mobilizer. Its main mechanism of action was triggering the release of stem cells from the bone marrow. So after documenting the mechanism of action, the active compound, doing the proof of concept, filing patents and all of that, launching the first product on the marketplace, the first stem cell mobilizer, which was simply an extract of this blue-green algae, I was intrigued. What else can we find in the world, in the plant world, that may also be working as a stem cell mobilizer, but nobody had ever looked at this before because it was not a thing. So I started to look at other plants that had been documented historically to be associated with a broad variety of health benefits. And where I really found some of the star plants is when I had a chance to travel into remote areas of the world. So in Madagascar, for example, they have one specific species of aloe. Of 65 species of aloe, there is one species that has been used for centuries to make a local product called vahona. And so I traveled to Madagascar, started to work with a group there in Madagascar. So we made an extract out of this specific aloe, started to test it using flow cytometry, and we discovered so far one of the greatest response, one of the best ingredients to put stem cells in circulation. At some point, I was traveling in China, and I asked a group of biochemists that had worked with various plants from the Chinese pharmacopoeia, you're lost on an island, you can only bring one plant. That was my question to them. As a teaser, half a joke, I just wanted to see what they would tell me. You're lost on an island and you can only bring one plant of Chinese pharmacopoeia. What would it be? And all three told me sea buckthorn berry. I thought it was amazing, intriguing at the least. So I dove into the science, and I found that sea buckthorn berry had been used in Tibetan medicine, Mongolian medicine, Chinese medicine for problems of the lung, of the heart, cardiovascular system, problem of the pancreas, and to speed up the recovery from bone fractures, burn to the skin, cut to the skin. So I traveled to the Tibetan plateau, started to work with a farm harvesting sea buckthorn berry, and we developed an extract and we tested for it, and we saw a great response, another one of the best response that we have seen so far. So throughout all this work of traveling throughout the world, and I will skip the detail of all the other plants, but essentially I brought together the top plants that we have documented act as stem cell mobilizer and blended them together. So you take 2 capsules of stem regen release and you will on average for a 50-year-old put an additional about 10 million stem cells in circulation, which is essentially boosting the body's ability to repair. Now, go back to what we talked about before, what has been shown in animal studies, what we can see in terms of tissue repair by putting more stem cells in circulation with treatments that are difficult to translate to humans because of the side effects of those drugs that are used, side effects that are not seen with these plants. And here's what we can see. So this is an ongoing study that we have started with congestive heart failure, so chronic stable congestive heart failure, people that have at least 2 years of congestive heart failure. So the typical experience of these individuals is that they walk one flight of stairs or they walk one block and then they need to sit on a bench and basically catch up their breath for 5-10 minutes. We put them on 2 capsules 3 times a day for 6 months. And after 6 months, so it's an ongoing study. We want to build that study up to at least 100 participants. So, but we decided to publish, this was published about 4 or 5 months ago. We decided to publish the 10 first patients to help us recruit more effectively in that study, because those first 10 patients, all 10, after 6 months, recovered normal heart function. So we can see it here with ejection fraction at about 43% on average. And after 6 months, all patients in that study have normal ejection fraction above 50%. When we look at natriuretic peptides, we see a decrease. The Seattle Angina Questionnaire, their heart how could I say, their heart handicapped, if you want, their heart problem essentially normalized. Over the years, we saw all kinds of benefits. I'm showing the video here of one benefit with someone with Parkinson. So the 2 videos that you see here is prior to starting to take StemRegen, and about 6 weeks after taking StemRegen. You see the rest of the videos. His quality of life was significantly improved. It is a star case, so I cannot say that we see this in everybody, but that case and a number of other cases was enough to justify doing a study on Parkinson. So just like the one we do in heart study, we recruit people with a long history of slowly evolving Parkinson, and then we put them on 2 capsules 3 times a day. And so far, this is preliminary data. This is just the first 7 patients, and we can see an improvement on the various parameters that we see with Parkinson's patients, which is sleep disturbance, depression, poor balance, tremor. These are the main characteristics. So every single one of them improved anywhere between 40 to 60%. We are looking to do a study with COPD, with liver failure, with colitis. We have no intention to show or to claim StemRegen is good for heart disease, Parkinson, or any of these conditions. What we want to show is simply that stem cells are the human body's natural repair system. It happens to decline as we age. That decline is creating the terrain or the space for problems to develop because stem cells cannot repair because there are not enough in circulation. If we can put more in circulation, we just give back the body its innate ability to repair, and the impact clinically can be really significant. And let's show examples of this in conditions where normally in medicine we see tissues that cannot repair. So we have chosen, in terms of problems, first the heart, here the brain. We're going to do COPD to show that these organs normally in medicine are believed to not repair. So if we can show significant improvement, at least it is clearly showing that the human body has an amazing ability to repair. And if we can tap into it, at the very least, it should constitute the first line of treatment as a strategy for helping anybody recover from any kind of problem. Here's one video that I'm showing. We may, if we have a chance in the clinic to do this, we have one place now where we're looking at doing this. Here's one case of spinal cord injury. Somebody that after a car accident, she can move a little bit her right leg. She has absolutely zero movement in her left leg. When we ask her to move the left, it's the right that moves. So she started on the product. She took a lot. She took 4 capsules 3 times a day. And so this is after 8 months, where you can see movement of both legs, bending at the knee, lateral movement. And 2 months later, she showed us what she could do in her bed, and you will see right after here. So when she's in her bed, she can now, so we're talking about, so no physical therapy, just releasing her own stem cells. We can see pelvic muscle, abdominal muscle, back muscle. I mean, the entire body seems to slowly recover, where now she can be using the weight of her own legs to basically sit in her bed, scoot back in her bed. So she can now eat normal, well, normally. She can eat on her own. She can hold the book. So the question here is that what could happen if this was started soon after the injury, accompanied with physical therapy? That's what I would like to do with a center that deals with spinal cord injury. And the last one here, just to show as a sort of as the poster child, or the if I could say the flagship example of what is repair in the body. This is the wound of somebody who was opening a floor with a round saw. It bounced and it landed on his thigh. So this is an opening, a gash of about 20 centimeters long, like 10 inches long, about an inch deep. It missed the artery. So he was lucky, let's put it this way. So he was told it would take about 4 weeks before he can stand on that leg, and probably another 4 weeks before he can walk normally. He took a lot of product, 2 capsules every 2-3 hours around the clock. This is 8 days after the injury, and this is the scar after 16 days. It's a better scar than many C-section. Just again to show, this is the impact. If you don't have enough stem cells in circulation, the local fibroblast will kick in and will basically seal that wound and seal the tissue under the skin. If you have enough stem cells in circulation, it's myocytes that are originated, the muscle, it's blood vessels, it's connective tissue, it's the skin, it's keratinocytes, sebaceous gland, of sweat glands, everything normal that you find in a normal skin, and you get very, very little scar tissue. That is what happens in every tissue if you have more stem cells in circulation. Now, when we trigger the release of stem cells in circulation, we don't always see the maximum benefit that we're looking for, or to the extent that we're looking for, and also with the speed of what we're looking for. Not everybody seems to recover or to repair with the same efficiency. So remember, going back to the video that I showed you at the very start, in a heart completely regenerated from scratch simply by applying or laying out stem cells from the bone marrow on this soft skeleton of the heart. So we know that stem cells can really show significant repair in the body. And I said, the question is, what stands in the way of stem cells be able to accomplish this in the body? And there are 2 things that come to mind immediately in terms of obstacles that can go and help stem cells, allow stem cells to do their work of repair. Number 1 is the ability of stem cells that can be up to 30 microns to be able to penetrate a small capillary, and that it can be 12 microns in the area where there's an injury. Because oftentimes when there's a chronic problem, the chronic nature of the problem has affected the microcirculation locally, and stem cells may not always reach the area. So we have developed another product called Mobilize, which is essentially nattokinase to increase entrainment of stem cells, so blood fluidity, entrainment of stem cells in an area, antioxidants, bioflavonoids to help rebuild the flexibility of capillaries, nitric oxide producers to dilate arterioles so we can increase blood flow to these capillaries, and polysaccharides to help rebuild the glycocalyx so stem cells or cells can flow more easily into capillaries. Also, another thing that can prevent stem cells from going where they need to go is systemic inflammation. The best way for me to summarize this is, think that you have in your body somewhere a small, not in your body, in your house, a small fire, very small fire. It's not growing, it stays there, but it's creating smoke. And after 2 weeks, there's smoke in the house. And in medicine, this is systemic inflammation. And we spend so much energy trying to suppress systemic inflammation because it has been linked with a lot of other kind of problems, health problems. It's like looking at the smoke and saying it's creating cough, it's creating lung problem, it's creating all kind sleep disturbance. And so we're trying to remove the smoke. And all we have to do is go and put off the fire. And so much effort is put in the body to suppress systemic inflammation, when in reality, all we need to do is stimulate repair. So once you've repaired the area where there's the problem, you get rid of systemic inflammation. But stem cells, in order to find that area to go and repair, if you have systemic inflammation, that's a signal that should be localized, telling stem cells where to go. When it has become systemic, it really clouds the ability of stem cells to really identify where they need to go. So we have developed a product called Signal that is a blend of plant extract that have all been documented sorry, to block inflammation at various pathways of inflammation. So COX-2 blocker, 5-LOX blockers, the secretion of inflammatory cytokines, bromelain to digest existing cytokines. So all kinds of plant extract, all targeting various aspects of inflammation to suppress the noise in the systemic circulation, so that we improve signaling to allow stem cells to find where to go in the body and really do the process of tissue repair. So in conclusion here, all of this to just say, if we can support stem cell function, which means more stem cells in circulation, them being able to find where to go in the body and access the microcirculation in that area and allow the body to repair the way that the body was naturally designed to repair, not only can we help issues or problem to repair when we have them, but also we can support this natural process of tissue turnover. So the health that we have today, we can keep it for years to come, and which means essentially longevity. Back to you, Tracy. I hope I was not too long.
No, it was fabulous. There are a few questions in the queue. So I am going to just grab those for you. First question is, how do we know that we can stimulate bone marrow stem cell releases indefinitely? Can it be possible that bone marrow stem cells have a cap on release of number of stem cells and controlled by your genes?
There's not. I can answer this question in so many different ways. One of them would be, have you ever seen somebody on the sidewalk walking and suddenly they ran out of stem cells and they die? It's just not something that is seen. It is the function of your bone marrow to essentially multiply during your entire life. What happens is that it shrinks, but that shrinking is not driven by release. There's even argument to say that the more you release them, the more you maintain a healthy bone marrow that actually produces more stem cells. Look at athletes. If you take an Olympic athlete or anybody who work out very significantly, one significant workout, I mean significant workout, can triple the number of stem cells in circulation. So you have people who have tripled the number of stem cells in circulation daily for decades sometimes. So look at any Olympic athletes. Do they have this condition that is called running out of stem cells? No, they may have worn out some joints because they have over abused them, but they don't have heart problem, lung problem. Like nowhere do they show. To the contrary, to a large extent, they tend to be healthier than other individuals, aside from the wear and tear that they may have imposed on the body. So I can answer this question in many ways. Here's another way to explain it. All these plants that are used in this product have been used for centuries. We identified them based on historical use and the benefit that these plants have been delivering in terms of human health. And nowhere do we see that these plants have been associated with some form of side effects that could be linked remotely to a bone marrow condition or insufficiency. It is just not something that exists.
Okay. Is there research on cancer growth by stem cell stimulation?
If there's anything, there is cancer suppression by stem cell mobilization. I'm not saying stem cell injection. Stem cell injection is another story. The picture is not as clear as with stem cell mobilization, but there's no problem with stem cell mobilization. And I think it's easy. When we look at this, rightly so, I'm not saying these questions are legitimate. We look at this rightly so from a clinical angle. And I'm basically just saying, reposition our way of looking at it. This is how your body has worked since the day you're born. Athletes stimulate stem cells all the time. Are athletes more prone to cancer? No, it is not something that has seen. It's actually probably the contrary. We did a study now, probably it was published in 2010, and it was one of our questions. Not that I was worried about it, but it's a question that simply needed to be answered. So we implanted human breast cancer cells in mice, and we monitored tumor growth in two groups of mice, one control and one group in which we gave at the time 10 times the daily recommended dose of this blue-green algae extract, which was our first product. And what we saw after 6 weeks is a 30% reduction in tumor growth, which is what we have seen. It's among the top 10 stories or benefit that we hear from people is suppression of tumor growth. But we
Right.
don't use it, we don't claim it, we'll never use it. It's not a message that is around our product, but we have seen it enough, aside from the studies that we have done, to clearly be able to say, no, there is not issue with tumor growth whatsoever.
Yeah, and I also think that when this research comes out, not from your company, but from, the opposing side saying that, stem cells can activate tumor growth, we have to consider the fact that they're talking about potentially people that use chemo and or radiation that could potentially have damaged stem cells. Because as I've learned, about stem cell activation post chemo and radiation, these are still cells. And what everyone has to remember is cancer cells are your cells. They're not some foreign cell. They're yours. They just either can't repair or they can't die. So they become senescent and they're misinformation. They become mutated. So I personally, with clients, utilize stem cell activation with your product for people that have succumbed to a diagnosis of cancer and or recovered from it, regardless of pathway. We can regenerate and repair cells. I mean, I think that's the entire concept of what we do, right? If we don't believe that, then what are we all doing? So,
Yeah.
I
The-
support more of the studies, what you're saying of, you know, stem cells aren't going to create tumors in your body.
There are studies that are very confusing uh, in the scientific literature. Let's talk about them. For example, there's one that was published, I think, around 2008, I think, where scientists injected fluorescent stem cells in mice and then basically triggered H. pylori infection. And they wanted to study if the development of gastric cancer that follows H. pylori what was associated in any way with stem cells. And a year later, all the tumors in the stomach were green, meaning
Mm,
that they were derived from stem cells. So the conclusion was that yes, bone marrow stem cells feed tumor growth. But it's interesting because when you really read the paper carefully, we go back to a time when, still to this day to an extent, we're not having a clear understanding of how cancer is formed in the body and how we can treat it. Stem cell became like the new thing, like let's prove that it is stem cells. And a lot of people use those kinds of studies to prove that they were derived from stem cells. And yet, it's very interesting that in that study, the scientists are describing that after 6 months, the entire lining of the stomach is entirely green, meaning stem cells have regenerated the stomach over and over because of a constant aggression to that tissue, a constant damage to that tissue that is entirely renewed. And there's a point where out this stomach lining starts to develop cancer, and it's green because the entire lining is green. So the real interpretation is that without stem cells, these mice would have died long time ago. But the stem
mm,
cells have kept repairing over and over the stomach, and there's a point where the I don't know how to call it, like the pressure of H. pylori has now led to cancer. But the cancer was not derived from the stem cells. It was
right.
derived from stomach cells that happened to have been derived from stem cells because the stomach was damaged and it was
Right.
repairing. So it's when you take a step back and you start to understand how stem cells repair that suddenly you can really see how these studies actually leading to completely different interpretation.
Yeah, interesting. Great points. Well, thank you so much for being here, and to all the attendees, we really appreciate it. Don't forget that StemRegen is available in the Get Healthy Store catalog and can be added to your store today. Also, reach out to StemRegen for your wholesale account. I'm sure they will treat you very well and make sure you get all the education that you need. Their website is great. It's full of videos that Christian has done. So thank you, and I really appreciate your time. Are there any parting words that you want to leave our audience with today?
I mean, I think where I started with this presentation is just to like, let's take a step back. Let's just sink in all this information. There's a point in the not too distant future in med school, we're going to talk about the fact that the human body as a repair system. And it changes everything. Because right now, if anybody comes with either a cold or autoimmune problem, we modulate the immune system. It's the first thing that we will do. So understanding that the body as a repair system, then as soon as somebody comes with some sort of tissue damage, leveraging the repair system will become really the first thing that we will do to help somebody recover from anything. So I would just say let's this sink in because it's huge.
Yeah, and I also think it's something that has been neglected for a while in the industry. We're all about the detox and immune modulation, but then we have to repair the damage after. So thank you for your contribution to the industry. Thank you for StemRegen and all your research. Guys, don't forget, add it to your store and get your wholesale account. We'll see you next time. Thank you.